name is Dan Walter. I'm an assistant professor of German and linguistics at Emory University's Oxford College, which is about 30 miles east of Atlanta. I'm here to talk today about my book, Psycholinguistic Approaches to Instructed Second Language Acquisition, Linking Theory, Findings, and Practice. My goal with this book was to make explicit some of the arguments that have been floating around for the last 10 or 15 years in terms of how do we connect second language acquisition and research to the classroom, and not just that, but also make that knowledge interpretable and digestible for teachers and learners, not just for people who do second language acquisition research. And of course, this book takes a psycholinguistic perspective. And so what I'm looking at specifically are the processes, the psycholinguistic processes that play out across the lifespan of the learner, as well as throughout the curriculum. The book is separated into 6 different chapters. The first one is more of a history of instructed second language acquisition. I dive into why people have learned languages for generations, for hundreds of years, and then take a little bit more of a modern view of the different turns in SLA. So psycholinguistic turn, or the cognitive turn, the social turn, as well as the multilingual turn, and what those mean for instructed second language acquisition, as well as the future of research in this area. The book then has 5 more chapters. Chapters 2 and 3 are a little bit more research or theory heavy, and in those I make an argument about what the role of consciousness is, and how maybe we have been separating too strongly explicit and implicit knowledge in the ways that we think about what's happening inside of learners' minds. And then chapters 4 through 6 take a little bit more of a practical approach, or one that is definitely applied to specific areas. So in chapter 4, I talk about how this continuum of consciousness that I talk about in chapters 2 and 3 plays out within an individual over the course of their learning experience. Chapter 5 takes a look at the classroom and how psycholinguistic processes play out across individuals and in social settings. And then the last chapter is recommendations for using what was talked about in the rest of the book to design a curriculum and how to go about teaching a language in general. So chapters 2 and 3, my main argument for those of you who are interested in the theory and the research there is about how in the field we've had a pretty strong divide in terms of what we think of conscious knowledge and unconscious knowledge. A lot of times we refer to these as explicit versus implicit knowledge, or procedural knowledge versus declarative knowledge. And what I try to do in these 2 chapters is kind of break down that divide a bit and show that a lot of these processes are actually happening both within a conscious space and within an unconscious space, and that those conscious and unconscious spaces are not so different than we think, and it's more about what is in the attention of the learner, or what the attention is being drawn to by a teacher, and that those conscious and unconscious processes are more like on a continuum of activity rather than 2 separate sources of knowledge. In the rest of the book, like I said, is a little bit more focused on specific issues. So in chapter 4, I focus on how these processes play out across the span of a learner's learning history. So looking at how they start from their initial state, where we would say basically that they have no knowledge of a second language, and how that plays out through their early learning, how these psychological processes continue to evolve. They're the same processes, but they take on different forms or play different roles as students progress throughout proficiency, and eventually towards multilingual, having students who are truly multilingual or very advanced learners. Chapter 5 kind of takes the more social approach to these processes and kind of places them in the context of the classroom, how learners perceive place and space, the different types of artifacts that we can find in the language learning classroom, the people who are there, and the different structures in terms of administrative structures as well as educational structures, and the systemic influences that are happening to learners while they're going through these psycholinguistic learning processes. And then finally in chapter 6, I make recommendations for how to design a curriculum as well as how to design day-to-day activities, understanding with clear connections to what we know and what we are trying to say in terms of how the conscious and unconscious mind is processing information and how learning happens, and with awareness to the different types of psycholinguistic processes that are playing out. So I hope that you enjoy my book. I think that whether you're a researcher or an educator in that's teaching another language, you're someone who's learning how to teach another language, or even if you're a language learner yourself, that I think you'll get a lot out of this book. I hope that it pushes us in a direction where we can also, as a field, think more about how similar processes are playing out consciously and unconsciously, and then for teachers, how this knowledge can be easily applied and make sense to not just new things, but also a lot of things that are you are likely already doing in the classroom, and just to understand how we can highlight or bring forth different psycholinguistic processes to increase learning in different areas. So thank you very much.